Well, happy Palm Sunday. As you can see, I'm wearing red for Passion Sunday, which is the flip side of Palm Sunday. Blessed day to you. We're going to continue our discussions of the prophets. We've been through Isaiah. Isaiah was a prince of the kingdom. He had access to all the levers of power. And we started with him because he's the most accessible. There are some previous slides that give the great quotes from Isaiah. I think there's almost 70 some that you will all know and probably sung or remembered from Sunday school, maybe. Okay. Now we're going to go to the other two prophets. We're going to spend more time with Ezekiel, not so much with Jeremiah at this point in time. Ezekiel was a member of the priestly family. He was a high priest. He had access to the powers of religion. So we're going to spend some time with him to give you an idea about what he was about, because Jeremiah is also about some of the same things, but Jeremiah is dealing with political power structures, economic power structures, where Ezekiel is dealing with the idea of worship, of how we, as Nietzsche once said, turn the temple of God into a tomb. In other words, we do all the right stuff, but not R-I-T-E, not the R-I-G-H-T stuff that we should be doing. I'm going to tell a story, then we'll get into some of the review of some of the slides, and then Ezekiel. Every once in a while, with once a week, a man got off the Long Island Railroad at the Bel Air station. He wore a cape. He had a trilby hat. And he carried a case that you could put a hippo's head in. When people began to see him, windows closed. People scurried into their houses, and if they couldn't get into their houses, they swarmed into Jack's Corner stationery store. Birds would fly away. Squirrels would try and hide. If they couldn't, they would go into the electric system and short themselves out permanently, because the man that was coming was the professor. Remember, back in the 50s and 60s, anybody that taught music was the professor. He was going over to the Pulaski household. There were seven kids. 6 of them, you guessed it, played the accordion. Well, I will never forget that day. The professor came in, swirled his cape, and all of a sudden, 6 accordions launched into Lady of Spain. It was squeezomania at its worst. And the professor, with a voice that reminded us all of Bela Lugosi, would say, "Stop, I can't take it anymore." "Why? What's the matter?" One of the Pulaskis would reply. "We get all the notes right." Another would say, "Yes, but you don't have any heart in it. Your heart is not in it." How the heck can you do Lady of Spain with heart like it's Rachmaninoff's 3rd piano concerto? And with that, the professor exited the house. He swirled his cape, worthy of the demon of the night on Bald Mountain. "I will never come back again until you are able to put your heart and your soul into this." Well, that was the last time we saw the professor. And squeezomania continued. I had to admit, their rendition of the Beer Barrel Polka was a lot better. They never had the heart in it. Ezekiel is dealing with that old black spiritual. Mr. World goes to church on Sunday, gets saved, and goes to hell for what he does or doesn't do on Monday. That's Ezekiel and, in a sense, Jeremiah in a nutshell. Let's go to the slides, okay? The first one is, again, prophets move us from judgment to hope. They move us from time of judgment to a time of hope. They remind us that judgment is temporary. Hope and grace are forever. Now, next slide. Again, Tommy Magliozzi. Are you wacko? And I'm unencumbered by the rational thought process. And in this case, people said, if we say the right things, have these great celebrations on festival days, well, we've done it all. But people's heart was not in it. People did not feel themselves a part of things. The structure of the temple took precedence over the structure of God's grace. Now, Ezekiel, some of his contemporaries, from the time of about 600 BC to about 538 BC, would be Hosea, which I really will spend some time on because I love Hosea. Zechariah, which if you've been to church or you're familiar with Palm Sunday, there are two specific passages about the nature of the Messiah that come from Zechariah and, of course, Malachi. Wondrous, unknown, fairly unknown prophet. But let's move on. Again, you get the forms right, but you miss out on so many things. Let's take a look at this. Go in and see the wicked, detestable things done here. So I went and looked, and I saw portrayed all over the walls of all kinds of crawling things and unclean animals, all the idols of Israel. Remember that idols came in when you made a treaty with a foreign power. You had to bring their idols into the temple. It's kind of like if we made a treaty with Russia and brought in statues of Marx and Lenin into every church. It just would boggle people's mind. And incidentally, if you are ahead of the game and looking at the New Testament, you're thinking of Peter in Acts. We'll talk about that another time. In front of them stood 70 elders of Israel. Remember who picks this up? This is St. John in the Apocalypse, called Revelation. And Jezaniah, son of Saphan, were standing among them. Each had a censer in his hand. A fragrant cloud of incense was rising. He said to me, Son of man, have you seen what the elders of Israel are doing in the darkness? Each at the shrine of his own idol. They say, the Lord does not see us. The Lord has forsaken the land. Again, he said, you will see them doing things that are even more detestable. We know what they are. Trust me, they're detestable. Again, we do the right things, but for the wrong reasons, the wrong outcome. And then we wonder why things go bad. I want you to think a little bit. What is the purpose of worship? To connect us to God, to empower us, to offer us forgiveness, to offer us grace, to offer us healing, that we can take it out to our mission field, each one of us. Doesn't matter if the choir is great, if it's entertaining, if ultimately it does not involve our hearts and souls and minds, it is as empty as the bee jabbers. Again, remember, this is also about where is your heart. And if the center of worship has no heart in it, then everything is wrong. I once served a parish that was big on worship, very formal worship. And I was talking about in confirmation one of the prophets, and I said, "Who is he?" And a girl, wonderful girl, said to me, "Pastor, ask me why we should be singing this antiphon at this point. Don't ask me about the Bible because we've never covered it." Oh, now you know why God is upset. Now you know where you will see it, almost the highlight of Ezekiel, God leaving the temple. Next slide, if you please. 1649 and 1814 through 18. If it is not written in your heart and in your soul and in your mind, there are consequences. Now, this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and the needy. I don't know if you can get The Crown on Netflix, but there is this exchange between Margaret Thatcher and Queen Elizabeth II. And Thatcher gives her scoop on faith. And the look on Queen Elizabeth's face is unbelievable. She looks like she had been poleaxed. All the things that she was about have been turned on her head. There is no warmth, there is no care, there is only meanness in Lady Thatcher's view of people. If God has opened God's heart to you, how can you close yours? Or, just in a sense, leave it cracked a bit. Leave it unencumbered by the rational thought process that grace can continue. For ultimately, this is what Ezekiel is saying. All this is fine and wonderful. All this is great. But if the humanity and the holiness of life does not flow out of the temple, does not flow out of every heart, there is nothing. Let me just pause for a second. Again, failure to live and serve has consequences. It takes God out of the picture. Next slide, please. All right. Oh, made a mistake somewhere. Well, we'll work with this. Take a look at that. He does not eat at the mountain shrines or look at the idols of Israel. The mountain shrines were where people worship Baal, and their way of worship we don't want to talk about because I want to keep a G rating. He does not defile his neighbor's wife. He does not oppress anyone or require a pledge for a loan. He does not commit robbery, but gives his food to the hungry and provides clothing for the naked. Yes, you're hearing Matthew 25 here again, as well as Isaiah. He withholds his hand from mistreating the poor and takes no interest or profit from them. He keeps my law and follows my decree. He will not die for his father's sin. He will surely live, but his father will die for his own sin because he practiced extortion, robbed his brother. What was wrong among them? When Lady Thatcher talks about the parable of the Good Samaritan, she focuses that the man's first duty was to acquire wealth. If it wasn't for his acquired wealth, well, he wouldn't have helped this man. That is utter hogwash. But that sometimes is what passes for religion. Faith is a struggle. Many times the things we do, we don't want to do, or the things we should do, we don't do. You know, things I do, I would not do, and the things I don't do, I should not do, I do. It is a struggle. But the arc of a person's life must bend to a certain direction. It must bend and give holiness. God does not want these things, faithlessness, to be the final word. Next slide. Here we go. Take a look at this. Then the glory of the Lord rose above the cherubim and moved to the threshold of the temple. If you're thinking of Isaiah's call in the 6th chapter, you've got it. The cloud filled the temple. The court was full of radiance of the glory of the Lord. The sound of the wings of the cherubim could be heard as far away as the outer court, like the voice of God Almighty when he speaks. The Lord commanded the man in linen, take fire from among the wheels and from among the cherubim. The man went and stood beside a wheel. Then one of the cherubim reached out his hand to the fire that was among them. He took up some of it and put it into the hands of the men in linen. He took it out, went under the wings of the cherubim to be seen that looked like human hands. God is leaving the temple, and he entrusts his fire to the faithful. But this is not where God wishes things to be. The people's ego eased God out. They were more concerned about themselves than anything else. Think of Lady Thatcher and the great and wondrous remark one of my English friends once said about her. Her favorite charity is herself. Sorry, brought back some memories. Okay. God has not left. God has been forced out because the people don't have any room for God. Next slide, please. Here we go. Think of the images. We get obsessed with what are all these things? Are these things spaceships? Are these things aliens? It's trying to overwhelm us with an image. It's trying to overwhelm us with an unbelievable holiness, awesomeness, and breadth of life. The entire bodies, including their backs, their hands, their wings, were completely full of eyes, as were the four wheels. In other words, it can't hide from God. That's why, in a sense, on the $1 bill, you've got that eye on top of the pyramid. You can't hide from God. Let's take the next slide, please. And here we've got some great stuff. Again, when hope is gone, contrary to our rational thoughts, God does grace. Remember that great line in the raising of Lazarus. Lord, he's been in there 4 days. And to quote Lancelot Andrews, and he doth stinketh mightily. He's beyond hope after 4 days. When you smell this, there is no hope. But where there is no hope, God makes hope. I will save my flock. They will no longer be plundered. God's judgment, God's love always overwhelms wrath. I will judge between the sheep and one another. I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David. Remember, even though David was unfaithful, God was faithful. Even though the various kings, and if you read Matthew's genealogy, they weren't the most faithful people. They weren't the most loving, kind, and gracious people, but God was. And that's what we've got to focus on. God works with sinful beings, and he will tend them and be their shepherd. Remember, the purpose of the shepherd was to get us through the dark valleys, to lay down the places where the beasts could destroy us, and there do grace. Wondrous little passage. Next slide, please. I will take you out of the nations. I will gather you from all the countries and bring you back into your land. I will sprinkle clean water on you and you will be clean. What does that sound like? I will cleanse you from all your impurities and from your idols. Think about that. This is what God offers us, not just once in a blue moon, but every day. It's almost a commercial for baptism. But they didn't have baptism then. Will gather you from all the countries. You're all over, but my arms can reach out everywhere. As the psalmist said, and as Isaiah said, did you think that God's arms are too short that they cannot reach you? That God's fingers are so frozen that they cannot hold you? I will reach out to those impossible, far-flung spaces, all the places you hide, all the places you feel trodden down. I will go there. Listen to that image. Say it a couple of times to yourself in the next couple of days. Next slide, if you please. Before we get to this, there is this wonderful part of 36th chapter where God opens the door of the temple after he has shut it. It's like Noah's Ark all over again. Remember that beautiful part where God closes the door to the ark, and then God opens it. He said to me, the water flows towards the eastern region and goes down to Arabah, where it enters the Dead Sea. When it empties into the sea, the salty waters will become fresh. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river goes, and there will be large numbers of fish because the water flows there. It makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. Fishermen will stand along the shore from En-Gedi to En-Engelam. There will be places for spreading nets. The fish will be of many kinds, like the fish of the Mediterranean Sea. There is a stream of living water that makes glad the people of God. Okay? See this in Ezekiel, see this in Revelation. The Dead Sea. Interesting, the Dead Sea was a preserve of some of the kings, where they used the mineral rights to make themselves wealthy at the expense of the poor and the needy. Power arrangements will be changed. But think of your own life. Where is that Dead Sea? Your dreams, your hopes, your passions, your relationships. Where is that Dead Sea? In this COVID time, it is a big place. God wants the dead places in your life to live. That's why that passage about the dry bones is so important. That where all is hopelessness, where all is declared loss, God says things will live. Where we just go through the motions, God says their passions can be. Where we are lonely, where we are stuck ordering vanilla for the rest of our lives, God asks us to sample something different, to reach into the pink tubes of heaven, take some saffron yellow, some magenta, some crimson, some varnish, and redo the walls of your life. This is the vision of the new temple, where a stream of water flows out from the altar, where we do not impede God's flow, where we talk not just of living waters, where we dig irrigation ditches. We see this in Revelation again and again and again, where we will see the tree of Eden turned into the cross, and the cross turned into the tree of life, image that is used in Ezekiel, that's later picked up by Paul, later picked up by St. John the Divine. Think about this. God is out to do something wondrous in those dead places, in those places that are put in the cedar chest and you never see them again, those places that we never thought would do things. Things are done again. Next and final slide for that. The distance all around will be 18,000 cubits, and the name of the city that time on will be, the Lord is there. 18,000 cubits, mind-boggling. In other words, the city of God is not just for the elite, not just for the chosen, not for those who have got enough spiritual merit badges. God reaches out. God offers God's home to be with sinners, to be with the downcast, to be with all the people that scare us to death, and even the person sometimes in the mirror that we look at. The Lord is there. And in the Hebrew, this might as well be written in 100-foot flaming neon letters. The Lord is there. The Lord is there in Detroit. The Lord is there in Flint. The Lord is there in Flushing. The Lord is there in Owasso, in Durand. The Lord is there in Swartz Creek and Brighton. Ezekiel is trying to tell us, when we put God back in, impossible things happen. Dry bones live. Hopelessness becomes hope. And judgment, which we have brought on ourselves, becomes the doorway to redemption. If we only open our hearts to the music and passion of God. Ask yourself, do you see God as passionate? Do you see God as being willing to change you from the inside out? Do you see God there in the darkness? Where do you want that sign and that name to be in your life, in the lives of others? I don't think there's another slide, but let's just try just to be sure. I think that's the last one, and it's the last one. The end is near. Have a great day, folks. We'll see you next week, and we'll give you a quick tour of Jeremiah. The only reason I'm not going to take more than a quick tour is, I've always told you, the language is unbelievable. The images are unbelievable. What happens to him is unbelievable. I'd rather deal with him in person with you. So from there, we're going to go briefly to Jeremiah and then to the scroll of the minor prophets. One of my favorites, one of the greats in prophecy, Hosea, followed by Amos. Have a great day. God bless. Take care. Up, almost done. Again, God is there.